Jessica Morgan.
I'm Dallas.
Veterinarian, farrier, and we would like to share some information about the coronavirus, specifically for farriers, mostly how we're handling the social distancing, the practices of good hygiene, and in general, just how we're dealing with the coronavirus. So I have a little bit of a slideshow for you, and it'll last about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll have a question and answer session where we'll actually stop the recording of this and be able to answer all of your questions. So without further ado, one of the questions that Dallas asked me was, why is this called the coronavirus? And the taxonomy or the naming of this virus comes from the way it looks from an electron microscope. And if you can see, there's this crown or halo, or it looks a little bit like the sun. And so that's why it's actually called the coronavirus. And to be completely fair and factual, this is actually the SARS virus. And so if you're seeing this image online, this is not the actual coronavirus that we're dealing with, COVID-19. This is the SARS virus, which is also a corona family virus. We're going to talk about other members of the coronavirus family. Today, March 29, 2020, there were 103,000 cases reported by the CDC, and there are over 1,600 deaths. And most of you have read the news, seen a lot of information on TV, and so you know that really the critical cases only affect about 8% of our population. But the problem is with these critical cases, basically 88% of that is lethal. And so if you're in critical condition, there's a high likelihood of death. And I'm just gonna try to keep it together for this, but I personally have a colleague who, her father is coronavirus positive. He is in the hospital by himself. None of his family is allowed to see him. His wife basically dropped him off at the emergency room, and no one has seen him since. And they're getting phone updates. And I can't imagine if I was a parent having to drop a kid off, or even being a child having to not be able to talk to a parent. So I really want people to understand that this is a very significant and very real threat to people. And in a very, very short, crude description, coronavirus basically enters your throat pharynx area where it stays for up to about 5 days. And then once it moves to the lungs, it produces this very thick mucus that basically suffocates the patient. And so this is why we're having to put people on ventilators and why it's difficult to control and treat. And again, we all sort of know how this is spread. It's primarily airborne, it's human to human. This is not necessarily, in this case, in this country, from human to dogs, human to horses, or vice versa. And it's not only coughing, but also talking. It can spread this disease very easily. And so social distancing of 6 feet is extremely important. And one of the reasons I use this little smiley face is to remind me that this is not just sick people that are passing on virus. This is absolutely asymptomatic people who can be spreading virus. There's a term called a super spreader, people who have absolutely no clinical signs but are spreading the disease to thousands of people. Nobody wants to be that. So how do you deal with talking to people just on an everyday basis? One of the things that you can do is you can take a drink of water after you're talking to people using warm or hot liquids. And this does 2 things. One, it improves your hydration status, which is critical for wellness, because viruses and bacteria will thrive if you are not hydrated or if you are unable to handle sugar well. This is why diabetics are at high risk. And two, the second thing that it does is when you actually drink, you rinse, and the virus from your throat goes into the stomach, neutralizes the virus. And so one of the things that you need to be able to do on a daily basis is wash that cup, bottle, or mug on a daily basis in hot water and soap. If you encounter people who have a fever, you need to tell them to go home because they must be quarantined for 3 days past clinical signs. And when we wear masks, we actually wear masks to protect those people around us. They do provide some protection, but for the most part, it's to protect the people around you. And New York State Department of Health has issued a statement that if you're sick and you have recovered and you start to enter the public population, you must wear a mask for 14 days. And so we are providing masks for our farriers. We want to disinfect those masks with spray or wash them daily. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. And I'm investigating masks that will work for farriers so that you can actually do your job without your glasses fogging up. And so the other thing that I need to point out here is that I'm very grateful to all the healthcare workers who are on the front line and thank them very much for what they do. COVID-19 on surfaces can last up to 9 days on smooth and hard surfaces. And we think about most of the surfaces that farriers use, they're stainless steel. They are hard and smooth surfaces. So in public, I suggest wearing gloves at gas stations and the grocery store if you have enough. And then I really, really want farriers to think about gate latches, halters, leads, cash, checks, your keys, the car doors, the steering wheels, when you're opening your rig, your glasses, your phone, your water bottle, all of these things are going to need to be disinfected.
Techniques.
Yep. And these are some of the disinfecting products that you can use that are beneficial. Disinfectants labeled for spray, doesn't matter what the brand is. 60 to 70% alcohol spray, which is the primary thing that we're using here at the hospital to spray on hard surfaces and then let it dry, because drying time is important. Alcohol needs approximately 1 minute for it to neutralize a virus. And the other thing is that when you look at your alcohol bottles, sometimes it'll say 70% alcohol, sometimes it'll say 90% alcohol. And the importance of that is actually that 60 to 70% alcohol spray is more effective than using, say, a 90 or 100% spray. In fact, we're actually diluting them down to be 60 and 70%. Disinfectant labeled whites usually contain 0.1% bleach or 0.5% peroxide, or you can use these solutions on your, just on your own with washable materials. This is actually something that we have instituted here for Dallas. This is a picture of our station when you come into the hospital. He takes his clothes off at or before the door, and he puts them in this plastic bag, and we put them in the laundry immediately, and then he takes a shower. This is so important because you do not want to bring this virus home to your family. So I highly, highly encourage you to set up one of these stations before or at the door.
So yeah, on the floor there's a box, a blue box or shoe box, and that's to put my gloves in after I get out of the vehicle. To dispose of them straight away. So I don't take my gloves off until I'm completely undressed. That's the last thing that comes off, so that when I actually grab the bag from the bottom and roll it up, I'm not contaminating that further, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'll leave it up to you whether you think that he has taken all of his clothes off in this picture or not. All right, so this is really going to be hard for a lot of people. It's really hard for me. Handshaking, that's a no. And so whatever we choose, whether it be a nod or a bow or a bump, it's really about acknowledgement. And unfortunately, I think in our culture, we may have to change this behavior, and it's going to be a difficult one to do, but think ahead of time about how you're going to address people and acknowledge them. And I think it's a personal choice, and whatever you choose will be the right thing. Hand washing, everyone's seen all the memes about hand washing. You need to do it. Hand sanitizer is okay, but I really think that we're going to run out of hand sanitizer. Please don't try to make your own. All of the online recipes that have aloe vera and essential oils make all the chemists cringe, because there's a suspension issue, and you may possibly be making the alcohol or whatever solution you've chosen to denature the virus. You may actually be making it less effective by adding something to it. So stay simple here, folks. Don't try to make something fancy. If your hands are dry because of all the alcohol use a lotion next. But for me, I think that on a practical and realistic level, we are going to have to learn how to wash our hands with soap that makes suds with the hottest water possible. And if we can do that for 20 seconds and dry our hands and then change that towel often. I change the towels here 3 times a day. After the morning run, after the lunch run, and after we get in from work. And so launder towels often. And I'd really like to have farriers consider washing their hands between horses. And if you can stock your rigs with some of these things, just like you stock your rig with shoes, we've got water, we've got paper towels, alcohol, gloves, hand sanitizer, and a sudsing soap. So today I sent Dallas off with all of that stuff, and we quickly found out that the nitrile gloves, the really sort of thicker gloves, didn't hold up to work.
As soon as I put my hand on a rasp, that was it. They tore straight away. So these gloves here, Craig and I stopped by Home Depot and picked these up, and Craig told me about them, and he said he'd wore them all this winter, and they worked very well for him. And I think Josh Hornquist told Craig about them. So it was a great tip, and I wore them on the last horse, and they worked great. I could feel everything I needed to feel through the gloves, so that was perfect.
And the reason that I like these is because they're washable. So we got a pack of 10 gloves?
Yeah, there's 10 pair for $10, so they're $1 a pair. But I think that I'm going to be able to get at least 3 days out of a pair of these.
Yeah.
And so they go in the bucket with all my other clothes at the when I arrive back at the shop. But for me, I'm treating my rig as if it is contaminated, period. And so that means that when I get in the morning, I'm going to put these gloves on straight away. And my goal really is not to take these gloves off all day until I get home. And so that when I take those gloves off, my hands are still clean at the very end. And so I think Jessica and I talked about it. If you wanted to eat in your truck or whatever, it'd be important to, obviously take these off and wash with the soap.
Really try to, again, hand sanitizer is okay, but hand washing is going to be better. And if you brought things with you to be able to accomplish that, I really think in the long run, that's going to help things be clean. And so the first thing on this slide is sterile versus clean. We have to approach this really realistically, which means that we have to try to be clean. We're not trying to make everything sterile. We're just trying to make it livable. And what that means is if we clean, we reduce the viral load, which we know that viral load is an important indicator on whether you're going to get sick or not. So if you don't get very much virus, it's pretty unlikely that you'd get sick because your body can handle that. But if you get a large viral load, then you may become sick from that. And Dallas asked me, so, you know, when do we use the personal protective equipment? And again, I think that we have to think of ways that we can use reusable supplies, because, you know, I had a lot of these supplies on hand, but I'm running out already. Hospitals need them. The earliest date that I can order another box of gloves is April 30th. The supply chain is simply not prepared to get us the equipment we need. So again, let's be realistic. Let's be clean. Let's use real usable things. Let's launder whatever we can. So gloves all the time, mask when in contact with people, and towels, continuously changing those out. Hot water wash with detergent. Again, anything that suds will sort of break down proteins and reduce viruses and bacteria, and sun will also do the same. So clients and stables, communication. You have to let them know that you're serious about keeping people healthy and horses on a schedule. To the left, this is the statement that Dallas is issuing to every barn before he goes. I'm committed to provide the farrier services you and your horse are accustomed to during the COVID-19 outbreak. We have a good hygiene practice in place, minimum handlers, routine disinfection, masks, gloves, and social distancing will help keep all of us safe. More measures may be taken at your stable based on layout. Please accept suggestions as needed. Let's keep 2020 a healthy year. You are more than welcome to use this statement. It's ours, but we're happy to share it. And so when you get to the stable, you're going to have to remind people of social distancing practices. We're simply not used to it. But I have found that if somebody just mentions it, people go, oh yeah, right. And so it's going to take 30 days for us to really break this habit. So keep reminding people.
If someone walks up to you and they start to get within the 6 feet distance, what you do is you just start backing up as they come towards you. It takes very little time for someone to realize that, you know,
yeah,
maybe I shouldn't get any closer. It really works well. You don't have to say anything.
It's Dallas's evasion policy. I can tell you that this was a better policy than him walking around with a broom in front of him and making people stay at a broom's distance.
Yeah, you just start backing up the second they come close to you. Yeah.
So again, minimal handlers is going to be really important, and don't be afraid to tell sick people that they must quarantine and to immediately leave. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask barn owners to disinfect latches, gates, cross tie snaps, and launder halters and leads periodically. And maybe if you know the farrier is coming, this is a good reminder to do some disinfection. And again, I think it's preloading by asking them to accept change as needed. And I don't think it's out of reason for us to ask for that. So historically, it's taken approximately, meaning in China and South Korea, and as Italy has gone on, 8 weeks before the turnaround time in hard-hit areas. And so we're about 2 weeks into a quarantine here in New York State. And I think just today, the quarantine was extended to April 30th. And so our high population areas, we're probably going to see staggering areas being hit, and your area, depending where you are, may be affected later. But I would strongly urge you to give this quarantine the time that it needs now, so that we can all get back to work soon. And I think everybody's pretty familiar with what flatten the curve means. And on the bright side of this, because we're all going to get a version of this virus, just like we've all had a version of the flu, we're all going to get a version of it. Hopefully, most of us will not be affected severely. But once this virus is cleared from an infected person, they should have immunity. They should be protected from reinfection.
And again, that's a good reason to try to adopt these standards. If you do get a dose, it's going to be a low dose. You'll have a low viral dose, so you'll be less affected. So hopefully.
Yeah. And on the left here, you'll notice that we have some little footprints from Gail's equine facility in Horseheads, indicating social distancing down the aisleway, which I love. Thanks, Gail, for that. I'm just going to talk very briefly about equine coronavirus, which in the literature is abbreviated as ECOV. I did get some phone calls about this. In horses, coronavirus causes enteric disease, meaning it's a gut issue. It's not a respiratory disease. And so horses will have fever, they'll be lethargic, they may be a little colicky, and they may have diarrhea. And most of the time when they're positive, we don't even know. It's very intermittent and very, very mild. I want to point out this article. Oh, pardon me. Sorry. This article that is posted in The Horse, this was actually done in January of 2020, and it's about equine coronavirus, and I highly suggest that you read this. Go to thehorse.com, put coronavirus in the search, and this will absolutely pop up. And from this article, Stacy Oak, veterinarian who writes for The Horse, these were her snapshot points. Horses will show clinical signs of disease within 48 to 72 hours. They will continue to shed coronavirus in their feces 3 to 4 days after exposure. But most of the clinical signs generally resolve in a few days. And outbreaks as that moves through a barn will typically last about 3 weeks. But horses will continue to shed virus for 3 to 25 days. And some horses have been documented for as long as 99 days. Also, intermittent shedding might occur. And this is the problem in people as well. These unapparent shedders may be sources of disease spread, and they don't show any clinical signs, but do shed.
So how likely is it that we can spread coronavirus to the horse population?
Well, so one of the things that we do in barns that we know that coronavirus is a problem is we use foot baths. And so, again, all the same policies are going to be in play. Cleaning door latches, reducing horse-to-horse contact, reducing from horse to person to then horse contact, all of the same things that we're talking about here. Coronavirus happens in all sorts of animals. In cats, they're really, really miserable because they get infectious peritonitis. And in dogs, mostly in puppies, they get enteritis. And in swine, they get severe diarrhea. And I'm just going to point out, this is my very favorite meme from Facebook, because the World Health Organization has declared that dogs cannot transmit the coronavirus, and there's no reason to quarantine dogs anymore. And who let the dogs out? All right, so the next picture, I know, Jane, I know, I had to do it. So the next picture is about pigs, and the swine industry has basically perfected how, and the poultry industry as well, how to prevent disease like this from spreading, because they've gone through coronavirus already previously, and they've sorted it out. So this is the end of the coronavirus. We're going to get through it. We would like you to practice good hygiene and stay healthy. Hi again. We've had a really great opportunity to answer some questions for people about how to reduce the spread of disease and how to keep people safe. And so here's a summary of the most frequently asked questions that we've had. I'd like to share with you a website that I have found quite helpful in identifying when an area is going to be hit the hardest. It's called covid19.healthdata.org, and I'll have that right here in post editing. When you go to that site, there's a green header bar, and you can find your state and use the drop down box to find out when your area is going to be hit the hardest. This is going to show you when the most resources are going to be needed and used. For New York State, it appears that April 9th is going to be our critical date. And when I went to find information for my family in Minnesota, it appears that their date is closer to April 22nd. So go to the site, be informed, be prepared, and stay healthy.
You start your day to go into the truck, you should be wearing gloves, and then anytime you leave the truck to go into a stable, you should be wearing gloves. You can wear your mask in the stable, but I don't think it's necessary to wear the mask during the day if you're just driving around in the truck. I did have a question about tools. How do I sterilize my tools? I don't think it's really necessary to sterilize those tools because you're going to be handling them from start to finish with the gloves on. Stable owner wants you to decontaminate. A bleach solution with spraying on the tools that you're going to take into the stable would be your best bet. You could, once a week, just lay your tools out on, say, a plastic table or a sheet of plastic, your hand tools anyway, and spray them with a bleach solution and leave them in, and obviously in the sun would help considerably. Another question was, will my tools rust up? And they may. I frequently, in the summer, leave my business for a few days. When I came back, the tools sometimes rusty just from humidity condensation. After using your tools for 2 or 3 days again, everything will be shiny, including your anvil. It rubs right off, so that's not really an issue, especially in light of the disease process that you're trying to prevent. Washing the gloves, if you bring them in, just like your clothes, in a plastic trash bag and dump them into the machine. These gloves that I've been wearing are washing up very nicely. I think it's important not to put them through the dryer because they have a rubber palm and it could melt off for sure. I could see that happening. And then the masks that I use, I've been washing as well, just getting a mild soap on there, giving them a good lather, and then rinsing them through. I rinse them through from the face side, and then just sit them on heater here because it's still cold in the northeast. Let them dry and use them again the next day.
That's right. And one of the most important things is actually the hand washing. So again, hot, soapy water. And if you can make what we're calling a vehicle pack, we're actually putting together packs that have water and soap and towels, so that when we have to go from store to store, in between we can actually wash our hands rather than just using hand wipes and hand sanitizers. And if you have a fever, please stay home. If you find somebody with a fever, ask them to stay home or go home. And if you have a decreased sense of smell or taste, these are also indications that you should probably stay home. If you have difficulty breathing or chest pain, you need to contact your primary care physician for directions or go to the hospital because you still need to have care. And so we hope everyone has learned a few things about COVID-19 and how you can help keep yourself safe during this time. And we want you to stay safe and stay healthy. So we'll see you again.